Sophie grew up in a small suburban neighborhood where her beauty often drew attention. From a young age, she learned that charm could open doors, a lesson reinforced by her mother, who emphasized the power of appearances. Despite this, Sophie dreamed of a career in fashion design, inspired by the glossy magazines that adorned her room. During her first year at university, Sophie was outgoing and ambitious. She quickly befriended a circle of women who shared her interest in social climbing, though their motives often seemed superficial. One of her closest allies was Naomi, who became both a confidant and a rival in their shared pursuit of success and influence. In her junior year, Sophie met Ethan at a campus party. His charisma and confidence drew her in immediately, and their whirlwind romance consumed her. Ethan's betrayal, a public and humiliating affair, left her shattered and distrustful, fueling a resolve never to be vulnerable again. Sophie encountered Jake during the summer after Ethan's betrayal. His calm demeanor and sincere interest stood in stark contrast to the flashy personas she had previously been drawn to. Encouraged by her friends, she decided to give him a chance, though she was determined to maintain control in their budding relationship. By the time they married, Sophie had crafted a dynamic that suited her need for control. Jake, eager to please, bent to her preferences, from the house they purchased to the friends they entertained. While Jake found satisfaction in making her happy, Sophie's insecurities often manifested as strict boundaries and occasional cruelty. Years into their marriage, Sophie began to notice changes in Jake. Once entirely focused on her, he developed new hobbies and friendships. While she dismissed these initially, her growing discomfort hinted at an underlying fear that her grip on their relationship was slipping. This unease set the stage for the conflicts that would soon unfold. Jake. Sophie's voice snapped sharply, brimming with impatience. What kept you so long? Cautiously descending the staircase, Jake clutched her purse in one hand, an unmistakable tension in his movements. With an uneasy expression, he handed it over while Sophie's friends exchanged amused glances, their smirks thinly veiled. Sophie, petite with striking green eyes, gave him a look of barely hidden exasperation. She hadn't changed much since college, still slim with a youthful figure. Her friends, except Carla, shared a similar knack for staying trim. Carla, however, was a bit heavier, with modest clothing and unbleached dark hair contrasting with the others' bold short skirts. Jake often wondered why Carla hung out with this group, or why they kept her around. She didn't fit in. While the others, especially Sophie, drank freely, Carla abstained. Perhaps she was the designated driver, that seemed the only plausible reason. Honestly, Jake, Sophie said sharply, you should be glad I'm leaving. It gives me a break from this damn cave. She gestured to the spacious 4-bedroom house she had insisted they buy 5 years ago, and it gives you time for your little friends. But don't let them into my house. Without waiting for a reply, she held out her hand. Now, the money. Jake hesitated, then handed over his wallet. She took all the cash without a second thought. Smirking, she added, if you're lucky and I'm not too tired when I get back, maybe you'll get lucky. That is unless I meet someone better. Her laugh rang out, joined by her friends, except Carla. Jake said nothing as Sophie and her friends piled into the new Honda he'd bought her weeks earlier. He watched them drive off, sighed, and went back inside. After tidying up, he loaded his Jeep with tools and auto parts and headed across town to work on a project. In the car, the mood shifted. Carla, silent until now, spoke up. Sophie, why are you so hard on Jake? He must love you a lot to put up with this. Don't you love him? Sophie stayed quiet, but Naomi, another blonde, jumped in. Love doesn't matter. Marriage is about control. Isla laughed. Sophie's just keeping control in her marriage, Carla. You still don't get it, do you? The wife makes the rules. Sophie remained lost in thought. She did love Jake, in her own way. Over 10 years together, he had always gone out of his way to make her happy, showing unwavering devotion. Yet doubts lingered in her mind. Her thoughts drifted back to college and Ethan, the charismatic guy who had once swept her off her feet. During their painful breakup, he had taken her to a romantic dinner, followed by a walk on the beach where they made love under the stars. He'd promised to call, but days later, she saw him with another girl. The humiliation still stung. She had been just another conquest. Even now, memories of Ethan mixed with her doubts about Jake, leaving her feeling unsettled. Despite everything he had done for her, Sophie locked herself in her room, crying for days. It took weeks before she returned to class, and she avoided dating for the rest of the semester during summer break. She stuck to group outings. By fall of her senior year, Sophia still refused to date until she met Daniel. Daniel was different, kind, respectful, and genuinely interested in her. Her friends encouraged her to give him a chance. Initially, Sophia tested him with challenges she thought he'd never overcome, but Daniel proved his dedication every time. Eventually, she agreed to a date, though she warned him not to expect much. Her friends were stunned by her guarded reaction, cautioning that Daniel wouldn't wait forever. When he didn't call the next day, Sophia realized she wanted him. Breaking her own rule, she called him, thrilled when he canceled another date to see her. From then on, their dynamic was set. Daniel worked tirelessly for her approval, while Sophia maintained control. She withheld affection deliberately, no kiss until the fifth date, no real closeness until after their wedding. Even after years of marriage, Sophia dictated the terms of their relationship. Daniel never complained, though her behavior left little room for compromise. Recently, however, new friends and hobbies began shifting his perspective. Daniel had developed an interest in cars, meeting people through the hobby, including Mark and Elena Harris, a couple he admired. After much pleading, Sophia agreed to meet them, curious about their influence on her husband. Mark and Elena lived in a lovely home with their daughter, Kara. Their relationship surprised Sophia. Instead of controlling each other, they showed genuine affection. Mark's casual touches and Elena's warm responses unsettled her. Elena even kissed Mark openly in front of guests, something Sophia couldn't fathom. As the evening unfolded, Sophia watched, perplexed. Elena sat on Mark's lap, unfazed by their company. Meanwhile, Kara wandered into the garage, climbing into Mark's muscle car. Neither parent seemed worried, adding to Sophia's confusion. Then Elena made an announcement that stunned everyone: she was pregnant again. Mark's joy was obvious, and Sophia noted how quickly the couple shifted focus to their family. Even weeks later, the visit lingered in her mind, challenging her understanding of relationships. Sophia's own marriage contrasted sharply. Though she hadn't cheated on Daniel, she liked keeping him unsure, reminding him she could find someone else. But seeing Mark and Elena's closeness made her question her approach. Absent-mindedly, she rubbed her stomach, lost in thought. Meanwhile, Daniel drove to Mark and Elena's garage to work on a project. Elena greeted him warmly, offering to let him start without Mark, who was working late. Daniel hesitated but decided to stay, appreciating their kindness. He admired their relationship, longing for similar warmth in his own marriage. Despite his admiration, Sophia dismissed the Harisas as strange, forbidding Daniel from inviting them over. She insisted their dynamic had no place in her marriage, ensuring her control remained intact. Yet, both Sophia and Daniel couldn't ignore the growing gap between them, sparked by the contrasting examples around them. That evening, Sophia and her friends stepped into the packed club, exuding an air of theatrical flair as they claimed a table. It was karaoke night, Sophia's favorite pastime. She relished watching amateurs try to charm the crowd. This club's twist was a live band accompanying the singers, a feature she particularly enjoyed. The first acts were predictably awful but amusing, escaping the stage before the crowd could turn cruel. As the night progressed, the audience grew harsher, mocking the poor performances. Sophia sipped her drink, seated beside a man who had been pursuing her for months. Occasionally, she let him kiss her or touch her chest, despite Daniel, but it never went further. Isla returned to the table with a disheveled man Sophia didn't recognize. Her smeared makeup and his satisfied grin left no doubt about where they had been. "Oh no," Carla muttered. "Relax," Sophia said, rolling her eyes. "Isla always does this." "Not her," Carla replied, gesturing toward the stage. "Look." Sophia turned her gaze to a tall woman holding the microphone. She had long dark hair like Carla but was slimmer, with striking features and legs that drew attention. The crowd began booing before she even started. "I didn't know Jessica was coming tonight," Carla murmured, her voice tense. "Who's Jessica?" Sophia asked. "My sister," Carla said flatly, her eyes glued to the stage. Jessica began singing, her powerful, clear voice instantly silencing the room. She captivated the audience, winning over even the loudest hecklers. By the time she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. "Your sister can sing?" Sophia asked, surprised. "Yes," Carla replied, her tone tinged with pride. She tried recording once but couldn't find songs that fit her voice. Music wasn't her passion anyway, it was all for her ex. "She's more into cars." Jessica soon joined their table, hugging Carla warmly. Her confident presence turned heads as she surveyed the group. Lila was perched on a man's lap, giggling, while Isla's companion bore lipstick marks matching her own. Sophia batted away the wandering hands of her persistent admirer. Jessica smirked. "Quite the party here," she remarked, her gaze lingering on Sophia briefly. When Sophia returned home, Daniel was already asleep, an unusual occurrence. He usually waited up for her, either to ensure she wasn't with someone else or to see if she was in the mood. Tonight, he hadn't bothered. Sophia felt a strange unease as she slid into bed, her mind drifting to the Harisas. For a fleeting moment, she considered stopping her birth control and letting Daniel father a child. The idea stirred unexpected vulnerability. Glancing at Daniel, peaceful and clutching her pillow, she thought, "Daniel, he really must love me." Tears welled up, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. Vulnerability wasn't an option. "Daniel, why didn't you put the dishes away?" she suddenly shouted, waking him. "Sorry," he mumbled groggily. "I had a late meeting, Anne." "I don't want excuses," she snapped. "I want my kitchen clean." Without arguing, Daniel got up and went to the kitchen. Sophia watched him go, noticing his strong build. She had woken him partly because she wanted him awake for closeness. She waited in bed, wearing only her bra and undergarments. When Daniel returned, he paused in the doorway, his eyes scanning her smudged lipstick and flushed chest. For a moment, she thought she saw desire in his gaze, but he shook his head and left without a word. Sophia was stunned. She expected him to come back but woke alone the next morning. Daniel hadn't returned to their room or said goodbye before leaving for work. Dismissing it, she focused on her day, tanning and working out to stay in shape. After all, she thought, Daniel wouldn't want her if she let herself go. At his office, Daniel arrived early, his emotions boiling over. After years of enduring Sophia's cruelty and indifference, last night had pushed him too far. Convinced she had finally cheated and flaunted it, he realized he couldn't take it anymore. Being alone had to be better than living like this. Daniel picked up the phone and called Caleb, an old friend and divorce lawyer. Caleb wasn't surprised when Daniel explained the situation. "I'm shocked it took you this long," Caleb said. "Handled correctly, we can get you out of this with your dignity intact." "I don't have any proof she's cheated," Daniel admitted, his voice heavy. "Don't worry about that," Caleb replied. "Forget the cheating angle, judges don't care anymore. Focus on what matters, or she'll take most of your assets, move her lover in, and humiliate you in your own house. Is that what you want?" Daniel clenched his jaw, the scenario Caleb described playing vividly in his mind. I'll guide you through this, Caleb assured him. You'll thank me later. With some time before work, Daniel sat at his computer, attempting to write a letter to Sophia. He wanted her to understand how deeply she had hurt him. The letter morphed into a poem, raw with emotion. It wasn't perfect, but it was the truth. His pain and longing spilled onto the page. Yet something felt incomplete, so he set it aside and focused on work instead. When Daniel returned home that evening, Sophia was already sprawled on the sofa in a short skirt, her legs provocatively positioned. Daniel barely glanced at her, his thoughts clouded with suspicion that she had spent the afternoon with someone else. Bitterly, he almost hoped Caleb's surveillance would catch her in the act. Ignoring her, he went to his office to research car paint options. Sophia, frustrated, had been waiting for his attention all day. Her plan was for him to notice her and practically beg for closeness, but his indifferent glance felt like a slap. "Daniel," she screamed. "When did you get home? Why isn't dinner ready?" He didn't respond. Furious, she stormed to his locked office door, kicked it, and then left the house to vent to Lila. But Lila's laughter only irritated her more. When Carla arrived, Sophia recounted the story again. Lila dismissed Daniel's behavior, claiming Sophia needed to solidify her control and push him to accept her terms unconditionally. Carla, however, was blunt. "Lila, your marriage failed because of your obsession with control. Stop projecting your misery onto Sophia." Lila protested, but Carla cut her off, recounting how Lila's husband had left her after catching her flirting. He had since remarried and built a happy life, while Lila's bitterness consumed her. Carla then turned to Sophia. "Sophia," she said gently, "marriage isn't a battle, it's a partnership. Look at couples like Mark and Elena. They're equals. They love each other deeply because they work together, not against each other." Sophia thought of Mark and Elena, their easy affection and genuine love. She realized she didn't know how to bridge the gap in her own marriage, or even where to begin. "Ease up on Daniel," Carla advised. "Stop trying to control everything. If you don't, you'll lose him, just like Lila lost her husband. And you'll end up alone and bitter too." Sophia sat silently, Carla's words weighing heavily on her. For the first time, she wondered if it was time to change. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Daniel emerged from his office just as Sophia went to answer it. "Hey, Daniel," Carla said warmly. "How's it going?" "Not great," he replied, sounding defeated. "I can't find anyone to paint my car." Carla noticed his downcast mood and sensed the issue ran deeper than a car. She quickly jotted down a number on a notepad. "Her name is Jessica," she said, handing it to him. "Tell her I sent you. She'll take care of you." "Thanks," Daniel said, his voice subdued. Carla added gently, "Daniel, you're a good guy. It's okay to stand up for yourself sometimes. You don't always have to give in." Sophia returned, noticing their conversation. "We need to go," she told Carla curtly. "Lila has some emergency." Carla raised an eyebrow. "I'm going home. Screw Lila and her drama. She told me to get my fat ass out of her house. I see no reason to go back." Later, Sophia arrived at Lila's house to find her lying on the couch with a compress on her head, looking miserable. Isla was there but quickly made her exit, muttering about a date. "Where's Carla?" Lila groaned. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Remember when you told her to leave your house?" "That's not what I meant," Lila snapped. Isla chimed in, her ex's new wife is pregnant again, and he named the baby after Carla's mom. Now her mom's the godmother and rubbing it in her face. That's why she's upset. Sophia spent the evening listening to Lila rant about her ex-husband, who had moved on and built a happy life. Lila lamented not having the control over him that Sophia seemed to have over Daniel. As Sophia listened, her resentment toward Daniel simmered, and she decided he needed to pay for not giving in to her the previous night. Meanwhile, Daniel reviewed recordings from the house. They mostly captured Sophia yelling at him, but Carla's words about standing up for himself stuck with him. Feeling encouraged, he called the number Carla had given him. Jessica invited him to her garage to discuss the car paint. At the garage, Jessica greeted Daniel warmly and gave him a tour, showing him the paint booth and her past projects. One photo caught his eye, a Mustang with a custom purple paint job that belonged to Mark. Daniel asked if she could replicate the color with white stripes, and Jessica agreed enthusiastically. Their conversation flowed easily, revealing shared interests beyond the car. The faint sound of guitar music drifted through the garage. Jessica smiled. "Sorry, I invited some friends for a jam session." Daniel smiled back. "I enjoyed talking to you, not just about the car." Jessica's expression shifted when Daniel mentioned Sophia, her pity evident. She thought it was a shame Sophia treated him so poorly when he was clearly a good man. "What?" Daniel asked, noticing her reaction. "Nothing," Jessica said quickly. "We're trying to write something tonight. None of us are great songwriters, but we love playing. Mind if I stay and listen?" Daniel asked. "Of course," Jessica said, smiling. The evening had an almost magical feel. Jessica sang a few familiar songs, and the group attempted original material, but something always felt off. As the night wound down, Jessica joked that they were probably just a cover band. "I don't know," Daniel said. "You just need the right song." Jessica shrugged. "People have been saying that for years. Music's more of a hobby. I do it for my friends. If I didn't, they'd replace me, and life would go on," Jessica said with a faint smile. "You're really good, though," Daniel insisted. Jessica hesitated. "Want something to eat?" "Oh, wait, you're married." "Not for much longer," Daniel admitted. "My lawyer is working on the divorce papers." Jessica paused. "So, you already know." "Know what?" Daniel asked. Jessica smiled faintly. "I stay neutral. I don't meddle in other people's wars." "This isn't a war," Daniel replied. "A war takes two sides fighting. This is more like a rebellion, my act of emancipation." Jessica looked at him, curious. "Don't take my word for it," Daniel added. "Ask your sister about my marriage to Sophia. She knows, it's always been Sophia's way or no way. The last few days just confirmed what I should have realized years ago." Daniel and Jessica spent hours talking, sharing stories about their failed relationships. Jessica confided that her ex-husband, despite having a beautiful wife, couldn't resist the attention of his fans. Daniel felt a connection he hadn't felt in years. When Daniel finally returned home near midnight, Sophia was on the couch in a nearly transparent nightgown, clearly meant to provoke him. "Where the hell have you been?" she demanded. "I was checking on my car's paint job," Daniel replied calmly. "I got caught up talking. If it matters, I'm sorry." "You should have been here waiting for me," she snapped. "How was I supposed to know that?" he asked, his frustration evident. "You never told me." "You should have known," she shot back. Daniel sighed and went upstairs, moving his clothes into the guest room. Sophia followed, yelling at him through the locked door, but he ignored her, jotting down words that poured out of him. The next day at work, he refined the poem, adding stanzas and a chorus, envisioning a melody and guitar riff. Later, his secretary interrupted, saying Sophia was on the phone. "Take a message," Daniel told her, shocking the secretary. He never ignored Sophia's calls. Minutes later, Daniel called Jessica instead. "Hey, how much will the paint job cost?" he asked. "You cover the paint, and I'll do it for free," Jessica offered. "No, I'll pay," Daniel insisted. Jessica laughed softly. "I just want to do something nice for you." They arranged for Mark's wife, Elena, to drop off Daniel's car at Jessica's garage. As Jessica thought about Daniel calling her Jess, she smiled to herself. She liked it, and him. That evening, Daniel came home early, changed quickly, and headed out again. "Where do you think you're going?" Sophia demanded. "I didn't give you permission." "I don't need your permission," Daniel said calmly. "You don't tell me where you go, so why should I answer to you?" "What's wrong with you?" Sophia shouted. "For 10 years, you haven't listened to a word I've said," Daniel replied firmly. "I loved you, hoping you'd stop punishing me for someone else's mistakes. But maybe it's time I let it go." Stunned, Sophia watched as he walked out. "I'm ready to listen now," she whispered to the empty room. Desperate, she called her friends. Carla suggested Sophia confess her feelings and admit she hadn't cheated, but Lila had a different idea. "Show him you can replace him," Lila urged. "Sleep with someone and let him know, you'll regain control." Carla scoffed. "If she does that, she'll lose him for good." At the fairground, Daniel joined Mark and Elena at a Mustang event. He admired the camaraderie of the enthusiasts and envied the ease and closeness Mark and Elena shared. Jessica arrived unexpectedly. "Hey, why couldn't I get my surprise today?" she teased. Daniel grinned. Mark hugged her enthusiastically, making Jessica laugh. "Well, that was awkward," she joked as Mark quickly stepped back, embarrassed. "Sorry," Mark muttered, smiling sheepishly. Daniel watched the exchange, struck by Jessica's warmth and lightheartedness, a stark contrast to what he'd left behind. Jessica joined them for the rest of the evening. As night fell, they sat on the grass watching fireworks. Daniel couldn't help but notice how Mark and Elena leaned into each other, their daughter asleep on their shared lap, a perfect picture of happiness. "Jealous?" Jessica asked softly. "Very," Daniel admitted. "Me too," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. In the following days, Daniel and Jessica didn't meet. Daniel was busy finishing a song he had been working on, while Jessica focused on painting his car. She worked meticulously, layer by layer, until the car shone like new. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sophia's relationship deteriorated further. They barely spoke. Carla urged Sophia to drop Lila's toxic advice and talk to Daniel honestly before it was too late. Sophia hesitated, torn between her need for control and her desire to repair things. One evening, Daniel called Jessica. "Don't you want to finalize your divorce first?" she teased when he hinted at his plans. "Haha," he replied. "Ryan has the papers ready. I just need to decide when to serve them." Jessica informed him that the car was finished. "You'll need to add the grille and a few touches, but it's ready for its first drive." "Thanks, Jess." "See you tonight," Daniel said, feeling a rare spark of excitement. As Daniel prepared to leave, Sophia walked into the room wearing a dress so short it left little to the imagination. "Don't wait up," she said curtly. "I'm heading out too." Daniel replied, "And don't bring anyone here. Use a rubber, or don't. Not like it matters, considering we haven't had sex in ages." Without waiting for a response, he walked out, humming softly. Sophia, stunned, realized she had worn the dress hoping he'd ask her to stay. At Jessica's garage, she greeted Daniel with a bright smile and dragged him to see his car. Covering his eyes playfully, she led him into the paint booth. Frustrated by their height difference, Daniel scooped her up, laughing. "Are you nervous?" Jessica teased. "A little," Daniel admitted. When Jessica finally let him see the car, Daniel was struck. The bright yellow paint glowed under the lights, and the white stripes gleamed against the base coat. "The stripes are painted, not decals," Jessica explained proudly. "They're seamless." Overcome with gratitude, Daniel leaned in and kissed her. Jessica hesitated but quickly gave in, her passion surprising even herself. Between kisses, she murmured, Carla is going to eliminate me. Jessica's hands brushed a lump in Daniel's jacket pocket. Curious, she pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring crafted from intricately folded paper. She laughed. You scared me. I thought. What would you say if it were real? Daniel asked seriously. You'd have to propose to find out, Jessica teased. It's not a ring, Daniel said shyly. It's a song. For you. Jessica's expression softened. Most guys say that to get me into bed, she joked. But they never actually follow through. This isn't about that, Daniel said. This song is for you. He picked up a guitar and began playing the opening chords. Jessica listened intently, humming along as she read the lyrics. By the time they finished, her expression was a mix of inspiration and trepidation. This is incredible, she said softly. But it's also terrifying. Later that evening, Jessica arranged a band rehearsal to try out Daniel's song. Beforehand, Daniel took her for a ride in his freshly painted convertible, the warm night air adding to the joy of the experience. For the first time in years, Daniel felt completely at ease. When Daniel returned home, Sophia was asleep on the couch, still in the short dress she had worn earlier. Daniel noticed she wasn't wearing underwear, but he didn't linger. Quietly, he went upstairs, packed an overnight bag, and wrote the note he'd been composing in his mind for days. Leaving it beside her, he kissed her gently one last time before walking out. As he drove away, tears blurred his vision. Despite everything, a part of him still loved Sophia, but her threats of infidelity, now seemingly realized, had broken something inside him. Sophia stirred hours later, hazy from the booze she'd consumed. She vaguely recalled Daniel kissing her and thought it was a dream. Too disoriented to think clearly, she fell back asleep. Daniel checked into a motel but struggled to sleep. His thoughts oscillated between the pain of leaving Sophia and the newfound connection he felt with Jessica. Her kiss had stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years, real, unguarded passion. By morning, Daniel knew he needed time. He called his secretary to request a few days off and asked Ryan to finalize the divorce papers. Ryan assured him they would be fair but firm, ensuring Daniel's financial security while leaving Sophia with enough to rebuild her life. Sophia woke with a pounding headache and an inexplicable sadness. She blamed the booze but couldn't shake the deeper sense of loss. She realized she had pushed Daniel away to protect herself from being hurt, but now she feared it was too late. Determined to make amends, Sophia decided to invite Daniel to lunch and have an honest conversation. However, when she entered their bedroom, her resolve crumbled. His drawers were empty, his favorite suits gone, and his bathroom shelf cleared. Panic gripped her as the reality of his departure set in. She replayed the previous night over and over in her mind. Sophia had warned Daniel not to bring anyone home, which had infuriated her. She started drinking to spite him, but now she felt foolish. The idea of Daniel believing she had cheated was absurd. She had only ever been with two men, her manipulative college boyfriend, Caleb, and Daniel, her husband. The stories she had told Daniel about other men were lies meant to keep him off balance. Her thoughts spiraled until she remembered Daniel coming home. He had kissed her and cried. Had he believed she cheated? Guilt tightened her chest. Her phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. Carla's voice boomed on the other end, full of frustration. Carla, stop yelling, Sophia groaned. Just come over if you need to talk. When Carla arrived, she didn't mince words. You look awful, she said bluntly. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Sophia replied sarcastically. Carla crossed her arms. You never listen to me, Sophia, but let me ask you, who are you going to find better than Daniel? Sophia stared at her in confusion. What do you mean? Carla sighed deeply. I've seen this before. You're heading down the same path I did. I was wild when I was younger, and my husband, George, put up with a lot. But one night, I got drunk and made a mistake. George couldn't handle it, and I almost lost everything. Sophia sat silently, Carla's words cutting deep. Her eyes widened as Carla shared her story, each detail sinking like a stone in her heart. A friend convinced George to sleep with someone else to even the score, Carla said, her voice trembling. He did, with one of my friends. But it didn't help. George said it wasn't the same because I gave consent. He felt like he had no choice. Carla's voice cracked as she continued. We ended up in an open relationship. I hated it, but I thought it was my fault. George never wanted to cheat, he only agreed because he loved me. For 2 years, we lived like that until he left me a note. It shattered me. I later learned he had lied, he'd never been with anyone else. He thought lying would help us heal. Carla's hands trembled as she gripped Sophia's. We're still together, but it's not the same. Our love feels hollow. Every time he looks at me, I know he sees those other men. It's only a matter of time before he leaves me for good. Sophia's chest tightened as Carla's plea grew more desperate. Sophia, real control in a marriage comes from giving it up. Daniel loves you, but if you keep this up, you'll lose him. Look at Lila, bitter, sleeping with random men while her ex has moved on. Or Isla, dating anyone just to avoid being alone. Is that what you want? Sophia tried to push back. Carla, thank you for your advice, but Daniel and I still have a chance. I'm going to his office today to have lunch and talk. Carla shook her head. That won't happen, she said bluntly. What do you mean? Sophia asked. Remember my sister? The one who sang at the club. Carla continued. She's gorgeous, naturally charming, and doesn't even realize the effect she has on men. And right now, she's helping Daniel move on. What are you talking about? Sophia demanded, panic rising. They're making memories together, Carla said. She painted his car. He wrote her a song. They're spending time together. Meanwhile, Daniel feels like you've been punishing him for years. He told Jess this morning he's leaving you and filing for divorce. He's devastated. Sophia felt the room spin. What should I do? She asked, her voice shaking. Don't let him leave, Carla urged. If he goes, Jess will likely go with him. Beg him to stay. Show him you're ready to change. Sophia read Daniel's note while Carla bustled around, making phone calls and preparing a green smoothie. As she read, tears streamed down her face. Carla handed her the drink. What is this? Sophia asked. Just drink it, Carla said. It'll help with the hangover. Meanwhile, Daniel sat with Jessica, rehearsing her band's rendition of his song. Watching her smile and hearing her voice gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Her enthusiasm was genuine, her laughter unforced, and Daniel found himself drawn to her light. Can we run the chorus again? Jessica asked. I want it to be perfect. Daniel nodded, knowing he couldn't focus on work with the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Sophia's betrayal had been the final straw in a marriage he had tried desperately to save. He had loved her through everything, hoping one day she would let go of her pain and love him back. But Sophia's treatment of him had only worsened over the years, especially after she started spending time with her manipulative friends. When she began openly threatening infidelity and then followed through, something inside him had broken. Daniel felt something inside him break open as Jessica sang. He realized, with absolute certainty, that stepping away from Sophia had been the right choice. This moment, creating something meaningful with someone who respected and cared for him, was what he had been missing for so long. Daniel's fingers danced lightly over the guitar strings, muting them to create the subtle rhythm that began the song. As Jessica sang, she approached him, her voice clear and captivating. Daniel listened intently, knowing the words weren't hers, they were his. The song captured everything he wished he could say to Sophia, but he knew she'd never hear it. Last night's betrayal had extinguished any remaining hope for their marriage. This performance wasn't just the start of something new, it was a symbolic end to his past. Jessica had suggested a poetic way to mark this transition, performing the song at the club where they had first connected. Meanwhile, Carla had been frantically calling Jessica all day. Sitting in a waiting room, she tried again. Jessica finally answered. "Hey, Carla. Jessie, do you know where Daniel is?" Carla asked, her tone urgent. Jessica sighed. "I could find him if it's important." "He's with you, isn't he?" Carla accused. "You promised to wait." "It's out of my hands," Jessica replied calmly. "I told you I'd stay away until their marriage was over. After what Sophia did last night, it's over." "Please tell me nothing has happened yet," Carla pleaded. "Of course not," Jessica snapped. "I'm not like Sophia. I don't go to clubs, let strange men grope me, and then tell my partner I'm going to sleep with someone else." "Where is he?" Carla pressed. "If Sophia insists on talking to him, her best chance is at the club tonight. Daniel's performing the song he wrote, for me." "We'll be there," Carla said firmly. Jessica added cryptically, "It'll be a special night. Dress for it." In Dr. Agatha Harness's office, Sophia recounted her story through tears. Agatha, renowned for her ability to repair broken relationships, listened with growing disbelief. Sophia didn't see herself as the problem. She acknowledged treating Daniel poorly but justified her behavior as self-defense against her college heartbreak. "Sophia," Agatha said gently, "was Daniel the one who hurt you in college?" "No, it was Caleb," Sophia replied, her voice tense. "And your behavior now, part of it is a defense mechanism, isn't it? To prevent that pain from happening again?" Agatha pressed. "I guess so," Sophia admitted. "Is it also about revenge for your humiliation?" Agatha asked. "Maybe," Sophia said hesitantly. Agatha continued probing Sophia's contradictions. Sophia admitted allowing strangers to touch her at clubs while barring Daniel from similar closeness. She insisted Daniel loved her and had never mistreated her, yet she had spent years punishing him for another man's betrayal. "Sophia," Agatha said, her tone firm, "you wanted a fairy tale life, and Daniel tried to give it to you. But instead of appreciating him, you made him pay for Caleb's sins. Bad things happen to everyone, but maturity means moving on. Daniel isn't perfect, but he gave you love, respect, and a life together. Instead of cherishing him, you've spent 10 years punishing him for something he didn't do." Sophia sat in stunned silence as Agatha's words sank in. For the first time, she began to see the damage she had caused. That evening, Daniel prepared for his performance at the club. Playing the song felt bittersweet. It carried the weight of his pain but also the promise of a fresh start. Jessica, by his side, exuded confidence and warmth, a sharp contrast to the emotional turbulence he'd endured for years. As Daniel strummed the opening chords, Jessica's voice filled the room, her presence electrifying. In that moment, Daniel felt the weight of his past lift slightly. This was his turning point, a moment where he could finally begin to let go of Sophia and the pain she had caused. Sophia arrived at the club with Carla, her emotions a storm of regret and desperation. Seeing Daniel perform the song, a raw, heartfelt reflection of everything he'd endured, shook her to the core. She realized too late how much she had lost and how far Daniel had already moved on. Sophia's jaw tightened as Carla's words settled over her like a weight. Agatha's earlier questions still echoed in her mind. Sophia had spent years pushing Daniel away while justifying her actions as self-defense for her past. "If you had met Daniel first, would your life be perfect?" Agatha had asked. "Yes," Sophia had whispered, her voice trembling. Sophia had admitted through gritted teeth. "So you're punishing your husband for another man's betrayal as well as for your own impatience," Dr. Agatha Harness said. Strangers at clubs can touch you, but the man who loves you and stood by you for over a decade has to wait for your permission to show affection. Can you see how cruel that is? Sophia dismissed the accusation. Daniel and I have sex all the time, at least once a month. If I could just figure out what his problem is, we'd be fine. Agatha's response was sharp. Sophia, leave my office. Come back when you're ready to face reality. Frankly, I hope Daniel does leave you. Maybe then you'll understand. Sophia stormed out, livid. Seeing Carla waiting, she spat out her frustration. That so-called doctor doesn't know what she's talking about. She actually thinks I'm the problem. Carla sighed. Sophia, do you remember what I said? You need to show Daniel you care. Make him happy. He was always happy until recently, Sophia retorted. No, Sophia, Carla countered. He might have loved you, but he wasn't happy with how you treated him. Be honest, why do you want Daniel back? Sophia hesitated, her voice softening. I didn't realize how much I needed him until recently. A few weeks ago, he took me to visit Mark and Elena Harris. Seeing them together, the way they looked at each other, like nothing else mattered, it made me feel empty. I heard Elena tell Mark that Daniel was cute, but that I was an idiot. She was right. Carla nodded. Daniel used to look at you like that. But if you keep pushing him away, he'll stop. And my sister Jessica is already there to catch him. She's not waiting until your divorce is final to get close to him. Sophia's eyes widened. She wouldn't. She will, Carla said flatly. Jessica is wild, but principled. She won't actively pursue him until you're done, but she won't wait long. Daniel loves you, but she's making him feel something he hasn't felt in years, appreciated. You have one chance to change this, or you'll lose him. Sophia's chest tightened as the reality of Carla's words hit her. That evening, Carla called Isla and Lila to join them at the club. It's my last night out, Isla revealed. I've met someone, and I'm ready to leave the club scene behind. You're letting some guy control you? Lila scoffed. Absolutely, Isla replied. He makes me feel amazing. If you weren't so bitter about your ex, you'd understand. Lila snorted. I'll always be in control. Isla shook her head. Control won't keep you warm at night. It won't tell you it loves you when you feel insecure. You'll grow old, angry, and alone. I'd rather build a life with someone who loves me. As they headed to the club, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. She didn't care about control anymore, all she wanted was him back, his warmth, his love, and the life they once shared. Please don't let it be too late, Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. When they arrived at the club, they were met with an unexpected issue. The parking lot was closed despite visible empty spaces, and a line of people stretched nearly a block. What's going on? Lila asked, puzzled. I told you we should have come earlier, Carla muttered. Jessica said tonight would be different. They parked nearby and approached the entrance, but the usual bouncer waved them toward the line. We'll be waiting for hours, Isla grumbled. Carla stepped aside to make a call. Moments later, she returned, smiling. We're in. Let's go. She handed her phone to the bouncer, who spoke briefly before waving them through. As they entered, the roar of engines filled the air. A convoy of yellow Mustangs pulled into the lot, led by a striking convertible. Sophia's heart sank as she saw Jessica's wild hair flowing in the wind, seated beside Daniel. He parked, opened the door for Jessica, and escorted her through a side entrance without even glancing in Sophia's direction. Inside, the club was packed. Finding no tables available, they spotted a man Lila knew sitting alone and joined him. Lila quickly left to dance with him, leaving Sophia unsettled. The man who had flirted with Sophia last week approached, draping an arm around her. Where were we? He asked, grinning. Get away from me, Sophia snapped. I don't need my husband seeing this. The man shrugged and left. Carla sighed. It's too late. Jessica saw him touch you last week. Daniel probably already knows. Sophia's chest tightened as the weight of her actions hit her. She realized she had never truly been in control. Daniel had followed her lead out of love, not submission. Now he was choosing his own path, and Sophia desperately wanted Daniel back, but it was his choice, not hers. Determined, she began searching for him in the club. A crowd had gathered near the stage, where tables had been moved closer, taking up part of the dance floor. She approached but was stopped by two imposing bouncers. No entry, one said firmly. Sophia scanned the crowd and locked eyes with Elena, who waved her over. At Elena's signal, the bouncer let Sophia through. Thank you, Sophia said. Where's your husband? It's odd seeing you alone. Elena smiled. He's backstage with Daniel, calming his nerves. Daniel's excited and nervous, it's a big night for him. Why is that? Sophia asked, her curiosity piqued. Daniel hasn't performed in public before, and tonight there are record label reps here. He's got a lot riding on this, Elena explained. Sophia's face tightened, and Elena noticed. Maybe you still have a chance, Elena said. You're here, which means you care, that's something. Sophia nodded, her resolve strengthening. Returning to her friends, Sophia ignored Lila's questions about the reserved section. Instead, she turned to Carla. Daniel's performing tonight, she said. Before Carla could reply, the host introduced the first singer, a man with greasy hair belting an off-key rendition of Crazy Train. The crowd jeered him off the stage before he finished the first verse. They're brutal tonight, Isla observed. Usually, they're kinder to the first acts. Something's definitely different. Over the next hour, 8 singers performed. 2 were genuinely talented, earning applause, while the rest received lukewarm reactions or outright scorn. The low point came when a nearly 50-year-old man wearing skin-tight pants that revealed a padded groin attempted Rod Stewart's "Do You Think I'm Sexy?" The crowd barely tolerated him. Another near disaster occurred when a man singing Poison's "Ride the Wind" responded to boos by flipping off the audience and mooning them. A group of irritated patrons chased him into the parking lot, though it was unclear if their anger was at his behavior, his singing, or his song choice. Then the atmosphere shifted. The stage was cleared, and a new group of musicians took over. These men looked sharp, focused, hunters ready to pounce. As they tuned their instruments, the club fell silent. The lights dimmed, and a single spotlight illuminated Daniel standing alone with his guitar. Sophia's jaw tightened as whistles erupted from women near the stage. How dare they whistle at my husband, Sophia thought, realizing bitterly that she had once been no different. Daniel smiled a charming, boyish grin and began to play a soft, infectious tune. The faint thump of a bass drum kept time. Sophia smiled at him, but he didn't notice her. Her annoyance grew as the whistling intensified. Then the music shifted dramatically. A heavy bass line roared in, and Daniel's melody transformed into a powerful guitar riff. The crowd erupted in excitement. Jessica joined Daniel on stage, her wild hair flowing as she smiled and danced. Their chemistry was electric, and Daniel became more animated. The lyrics struck Sophia like a blow. They described a marriage filled with frustration and neglect, Daniel's side of their story. As Jessica sang about being ignored, Sophia's heart sank. She realized how often she had dismissed Daniel's feelings, leaving him unheard. By the bridge, the song's intensity had the entire club on its feet. Despite hearing it for the first time, the crowd sang along to the chorus. Jessica stomped playfully, mimicking a tantrum, her smiles with Daniel igniting Sophia's jealousy. The lyrics echoed Daniel's bottled-up frustrations, and Sophia saw how much pressure he had endured before finally exploding. As Jessica began the second verse, about dwindling patience, she descended into the audience, pointing directly at Sophia. The crowd parted as Jessica approached. Reaching Sophia, she handed her a folded set of papers and returned to the stage just in time for the chorus. The packed club sang along, turning Daniel's marital grievances into an anthem. Sophia clutched the papers, assuming they were lyrics. The energy in the room was surreal, hundreds of people celebrating a song about her failed marriage. Strangers around her reached for the papers, treating them like prized souvenirs. As the song ended, Jessica's voice boomed through the speakers. "Sophia Tomlinson," she said. Sophia froze, her name ringing in her ears. "You've been served," Jessica announced, her words reverberating through the club. The crowd erupted in applause, oblivious to the personal devastation behind the declaration. The crowd erupted into cheers as Jessica and the band left the stage. Sophia unfolded the papers in her trembling hands, confirming her worst fear: they were divorce papers. Around her, people celebrated Jessica's performance, declaring her their new favorite singer. Nearby, women Sophia recognized from the club, known for their bold advances, headed backstage, likely aiming for Daniel. She stood in shock, clutching the papers, as the weight of everything came crashing down. Daniel hadn't just written her a song, he had made their end a public spectacle. Tears streamed down Sophia's face as Carla's warnings replayed in her mind. "Daniel, she won't start until you have the divorce papers in hand. She's younger, prettier, and ready to settle down and have kids, Daniel." Sophia had dismissed Carla's words at the time, but now they hit her like a punch to the gut. "Not with my husband, Daniel. Not with him." Sophia had shouted defiantly back then. Now, the reality was sinking in. Sophia and Carla hurried out of the club, leaving Isla and Lila behind. The drive to Mark and Elena's house was silent, Sophia's mind churning with fear that Daniel was slipping away for good. When they arrived, the house was surrounded by Mustangs, with a crowd of people enjoying games and laughter. Despite the festive atmosphere, Sophia's anger boiled over. How could they all be having fun while her marriage was falling apart? Spotting Elena, Sophia demanded, "Where's Daniel?" "Daniel and Jessica stayed back at the club," Elena said casually. "The band got a record deal, and they're negotiating contracts. Did you notice Daniel's Mustang isn't here?" Sophia's stomach twisted as Elena's words sank in. Without another word, she grabbed Carla and drove back to the club. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for Daniel's yellow Mustang convertible and a couple of limousines. Sophia knocked at the door, and the bouncer who had let her in earlier greeted her with a smirk. "You're persistent," he said, opening the door. Inside, Sophia spotted Daniel and Jessica seated together at a table. She stormed up to them. "Come on, Daniel," she said sharply. "Let's go home. We need to talk." Jessica hummed a few lines from the song softly, her voice dripping with irony. Daniel's expression was calm but resolute. "Sophia," he said, "you already have the divorce papers. The ones tonight were symbolic, but the real ones will arrive tomorrow. This is the best decision for both of us. I've been your lackey for too long. So you're just running off with your little girlfriend to play rock star and forget about us?" Sophia sneered. Daniel shook his head. "I have a career I love. Jess does too. Neither of us wants to be rock stars, but we do want more of each other. Once the divorce is finalized, we'll try to build something real. I suggest you get a lawyer." With that, Daniel took Jessica's hand and walked out, leaving Sophia alone with her fury. In the days that followed, Sophia found a lawyer. At first, he dismissed Daniel's claims of psychological misuse. Infidelity would have been easier to argue, he said. But after their first meeting with Daniel's lawyer, his tone changed. "They have video evidence of you at clubs behaving in ways no married woman should," he told her bluntly. "The footage from your home is worse, proof of you yelling, swearing, and humiliating him. Even your therapist records don't help you. If this goes to court, you'll come off poorly. Settle and move on. The divorce proceeded quickly since there were no children and Daniel wasn't contesting Sophia's share of the property. 3 months later, Daniel proposed to Jessica, and she accepted. Daniel bought out Sophia's share of the house, giving her enough to live on temporarily. Sophia spiraled into despair. Everywhere she went, she heard the song on the radio, in stores, even on TV. The band had replaced Daniel and Jessica with new members, but the original recording featuring their performance was a massive hit. The accompanying music video prominently featured Daniel's Mustang and Jessica's magnetic presence. Despite their brief fame, Daniel and Jessica returned to quiet lives. Jessica moved into the house that had once belonged to Sophia and Daniel. Sophia, meanwhile, moved in with Lila, but the arrangement quickly soured. They clashed constantly, their shared bitterness only fueling the tension. Sophia blamed Lila for ruining her marriage, accusing her of planting the seeds of manipulation and control. "You're the reason I'm here," Sophia shouted one night. "No, Sophia," Lila snapped back. "You're here because you pushed him away. I might have encouraged you, but you made the choices." Their argument ended with Lila storming out, leaving Sophia alone to face the consequences of her actions. That drive to control, the choices she made, it all drove Daniel away. As summer wore on, Sophia was haunted by the song and the life she had thrown away. Every lyric reminded her of Daniel's pain and the choices that had cost her the man who once loved her deeply. 2 years later, Jessica and Daniel welcomed the first of their 3 children. Their life was filled with love and tranquility as they built the family Daniel had always longed for. Jessica's warmth and Daniel's quiet devotion created a home filled with joy, a stark contrast to the turbulence of his previous marriage. Sophia's life took a much different path. Struggling with the aftermath of her divorce, she began to gain weight, her once vibrant confidence eroded by guilt and regret. As her settlement money dwindled, she took a job as a waitress to stay afloat. Often, Sophia found herself riding the bus back to her old neighborhood. She would sit quietly, watching Daniel and Jessica playing with their children in the yard. Each visit left her in tears, yet she couldn't stop. Some part of her clung to the futile hope that she could somehow reclaim the life she had lost, even though she knew deep down it was gone forever. The sight of Daniel's happiness, once hers to nurture, felt like a punishment she couldn't escape. And then there was the song. The song that became a constant reminder of her downfall. Whether it played in the restaurant where she worked, blared from a car stereo, or drifted over store speakers, it sent a chill through her. That song, capturing her failure and Daniel's liberation, became the soundtrack of her regret, a haunting presence she knew would stay with her for the rest of her life.